Mike, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
I'm actually really, really excited to join you. This is amazing to have an outlet like this to reach out to so many young people. I think it's fantastic. We never had anything like this when I was growing up.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do this too. So, for people who don't know you, can you us a little bit about yourself, just like what
Yeah.
you do now and stuff?
hmm So my name's Mike Walker. I own the Gold Medal Swim School in Chandler, Arizona. I was a former collegiate coach at the University of Texas, University of California at Berkeley, and the University of Illinois. I was lucky enough to coach pretty much every major international meet across the world, two Olympic teams, world championships. I've been really blessed to have coached a lot of amazing athletes, some with challenges like we're going to discuss today, but I've been really, really fortunate to surround myself with fantastic people. The swim school gets to touch the lives at a fundamental swim level, but really have had access to athletes and young people from really young kids, 4 or 5 years old, all the way up to pro athletes, 25 and 30 years old.
Okay, thank you. And then, so you have ADHD, right?
In 18-point bold font, I have it.
Okay, and so when did you first hear about ADHD, just like in general?
Well, something that actually, I'm 53 years old, and obviously I grew up in a very different era than maybe a lot of your viewers come from. There wasn't something, I mean, it was there, but it wasn't something talked about, and it definitely had a very negative stigma. So if you thought you had it, you kind of wanted to hide it. It wasn't something you embraced. I probably didn't learn that I even was aware that I had it till probably college, maybe even post-college. So it was probably in the 90s when I really even learned what it was. And it wasn't until I really started coaching that I learned that it could be a superpower. And I hope we get to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, I think that's gonna come up later. But so what was your life like before your diagnosis? Like, what are some of the things you did before then?
I was someone like many people that have this gift. I was someone that in a crunch time, in a big time moment, in a stressful moment, if the house was on fire, I could perform at a very high level. I tended to wait on assignments till the very last minute because it created crisis for me. I tended to delay, to procrastinate. It was a way for me to create enough intensity that I would hyper focus. And before it, I never understood, and I think I felt bad about myself that I wasn't able to sit down like my friends could and read for hours on end or do homework assignments that were more mundane in nature. And I felt like I was undisciplined. I felt like I wasn't mature enough. And at times, I'm going to be honest, especially when I was younger, I felt somehow I wasn't smart enough, or I wasn't like they were. I wasn't like them. That means that I must have been less. And that was a really hard part for me, Cate. That really was. I felt less as a young person because I didn't fit the mold like the rest of the students did.
Yeah, I understand that. I feel like that still kind of applies now with certain things, especially in school. And then, so when were you diagnosed with ADHD, and was there a primary reason for the diagnosis?
I think it was more through self-discovery of working with athletes. I would work with athletes that weren't picking up information. They were losing focus. They, like we'd have team meetings and I'd have to repeat things 4 and 5 times, or I'd have to always make sure I printed information out for them. And it wasn't until I really started to understand the psychology. I mean, I took a lot of psychology classes in college. I took a lot of sports psychology also. So I had some understanding that it was there. But until you really deal with it on a practical level, I never thought it was really me until I started working with athletes and said, wow, the things they do, I do. And so really through helping them, I really started to go through a self-discovery phase that allowed me to help myself. And I probably was never officially diagnosed. I mean, I have a doctor now that kind of laughs with me about how how much I have ADD, but I've never really been officially diagnosed. I've really managed coping skills.
And then, so what were some of the major changes that really followed after you kind of figured out that you had ADHD?
I learned I guess, tricks, if you will. People would call them coping mechanisms, but you end up learning how to harness it as a power. The hyper focus ability of our gift is really a blessing. And if you understand how to utilize it, I started to utilize it as something that I always treated as a power that I didn't want to get rid of, that I really did use it to help propel me. When I first started coaching, I would tell people I was passionate. I think when you have our situation or have our gift, finding that passion in your life really takes it and makes it a gift, because you can super focus and get so much high quality work done because you're so passionate about it. So for me, that's where I really started. I started understanding that if I fed my passion, then my focus would increase. So that was probably number one. And the second thing I did was I would not put myself in positions where my gift was then a weakness. I wouldn't put myself in situations where I could be easily distracted. Like studying at a Starbucks for me is a complete dumpster fire. That's not even a place I could study. So I wouldn't do things like that. I wouldn't go to the library and sit in the common room. I'd get a room and I'd reserve it for myself. And I would buckle down and put myself in a position to be more focused. So I think you end up learning coping skills that both help you to do better, but also you remove those situations that aren't going to help you. Like group studying for me in college was more of a social event than it ever was I was going to get work done. So as long as I understood that it was a play date, I was fine. I had to set aside private time later. So it's more, I think you just develop those skills that help you become better, or you avoid the weak moments.
Yeah, I know for me, at least personally, I get distracted even in a quiet room sometimes. Like I
do too.
Distract myself a lot, but
you're like, wow, this zipper on my backpack is so interesting. I get that too. Music helps me a lot. Music kind of helps me calm down. For me, a lot of it is the calming part. I need to be more calm.
Yeah, that works for me pretty well, honestly. I listen to music when I do most of my homework, and it actually helps.
Do you listen to music that gets you excited or more music that chills you out?
Depends. Usually chill. Like coffee chills me more than it makes me more hyper, really. So I don't know.
Caffeine, I don't know if we're supposed to discuss that, but yes, I drink a lot of coffee, especially when I have to get a lot of work done. I do.
Yeah.
Coffee, tea, green tea helps me for sure. A soda. When I was younger, I was naturally drawn, I think, to high caffeinated beverages. I drank coffee very early on and I didn't understand why. It was actually through your mom, Dr. Dunn, that I actually understood why the caffeine was so effective. I actually learned that from her.
Yeah. And then do you have any specific stories that you feel like really shows what it's like to live with ADHD?
I tend to see the world through very positive eyes. So I hope I can come up with maybe one that was more heartfelt and difficult. But I think the key for me, a story I had, is I can remember being at Berkeley, and I used to give video for every athlete on the team from swim meets. And this was before it was as simple as video editing on a computer. So it took a lot of time, but I was so passionate about getting it done. I can remember walking into the office at 12 o'clock and working straight through, no breaks, no nothing, until after 9 o'clock at night. And I literally looked up from my desk and I looked outside and it was pitch black. And so the idea was I was so focused on what I did. I was so enthralled, so passionate. The football game had gone on. I had like 10 missed calls on my office phone, but I was so enthralled with doing these videos and I was so passionate about wanting to get it done that I literally worked for 9 hours straight, and it was like that. But it comes back to passion. And when you're passionate about things, ADD becomes a gift. And you can just do amazing things. And so I could do an amazing amount of work in really short period of time. I had 36 videos to do. I can remember it was 36. And I always remembered that it was just so important for me in my life to love what I do. And then I think ADD becomes a real blessing. I really do. On the bad side, I think the biggest one is I would sit in work groups at school. And I can remember this when I was like in 5th, 6th grade, and I got in trouble pretty much every day. So I would sit in these work groups, and within 5 minutes every day, I'd be sitting in the back of the classroom. And I probably I think I was actually a frequent flyer in the detention program in my elementary school. I had my own chair in detention. And it was just because I couldn't sit down. I couldn't focus. And
Uh-huh.
it was embarrassing. I guess that was the worst part. I did pretty well in school.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing always getting sent to the back table. It was embarrassing
Uh-huh.
having to go to the principal's office. And so those parts were probably some of the hardest, that you get singled out because you can't follow the box. You don't
Yeah.
follow that line. And that part, I'm really sensitive now with athletes that have it, that you really try to put them in a situation to be successful. Me going in a group project at a table with a bunch of my friends, that was playtime. That was not get homework done time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put myself as a student in that position. But Cate, I can't tell you, getting sent to the back really did hurt me, feeling like I wasn't like them. And that really was hard. I have a lot of memories like that. It's funny, I can remember there's a blue chair in my 5th grade classroom, and I literally sat in that blue chair like I owned it. And that was hard. It was the bad chair. People that sat in the back that got in trouble, they were bad. And that was hard. That was hard.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of struggles with school and ADHD, especially like for me, I can't sit still. And one of my teachers in 3rd grade had a big problem with the fact that I would need to move around constantly.
Yeah. Did you ever have one of those squish balls? Have you ever sat on one of those, like the physio balls? I think that would have been really good for me. I really did. Did you ever try one of those?
Some of my teachers have those, yeah.
Do you like them or no?
It's fun. Yeah.
But you feel like a goofball sitting on this big ball in the middle of class too,
Yeah.
I think the segregation that goes on with, when you get ostracized when you have it, and then you can't follow the rule or the line or the standard. I think that feeling of being different and not in a positive way, I think that's, for me, those were some of the most harmful memories. Because you end up thinking you're less than, and there couldn't be anything further from the truth. And if I had to say one thing, maybe there's one person that would really listen. You're eventually, as you get older, you're going to understand that this is a superpower, and it's going to separate you in life and going to do amazing things. But you're young and you may not know everything that it can do for you, but don't give up. Like you have something really special that can help you. As soon as you get older and you work on it, it can really be something powerful.
Yeah, that kind of leads into the next question, which is, how has ADHD helped you in your career?
I think I learned in college the classes I was passionate about and excited about and wanted to do, I did really well in. The classes I thought were boring and a waste of time, I really struggled to pass. So for me, I did learn in college through school that when I took those kind of courses, so then I picked a job and I didn't worry about money. I wanted to have a job that made me feel like I wanted to get up in the morning. And so I directed my whole life that way. And it did affect my choices in life, because I knew if I was going to be successful, I had to really enjoy what I was doing. And I think that's probably how school helped me in terms of how it transitioned to my life, is that it really did teach me loving what you do matters. And in high school, it's harder. I get that. Middle school, it's harder. You have a set amount of classes. But if you can kind of find a way to make it more relevant for you, like maybe you don't love math, but you're like, oh, I do love, some other part, and I can take this one area of math. Oh, I like money. So then I can make money and math kind of connect. But you try to connect the dots to create more relevance.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but has there been any significant struggles that came with ADHD as well? Because there's a lot of benefits, obviously, but.
Right. I think the struggles are the mundane tasks, the things that aren't exciting. And part of greatness is a grind, that you got to grind through the things you don't want to do. And especially when you're younger. So the struggle are things that I don't find important, things that I don't think are exciting, things that aren't fun, things that aren't readily stimulating. I have a very hard time with those tasks. And I had a worse time when I was younger. So the struggle is having to complete those tasks. Some of school is completing the tasks. That's you're successful. If you complete your homework, you turn it in on time, you make sure it's clean, it's well organized. Those things to me tend to be boring tasks. And so the struggle was in school, where task completion is highly valued. Those things were really hard for me. And if I was going to talk to someone who was in middle school or high school or even college, is realize that that's part of the discipline. It's like a muscle. And that if you can identify, okay, these are boring things that I don't want to do, and take them as a challenge to create importance, you can kind of overcome some of those obstacles. Boring things, boring tasks, mundane tasks, repeated things tend to be really difficult for me. And still to this day.
Yeah.
And I have to respect that about myself.
Uh-huh.
That's my Charlie. So
Okay.
that's my dog. I apologize. She gets a little excited when I talk about, these things.
And then this is, what part of ADHD do you think needs to be addressed more and why? Like if you had to choose one part.
I think, are you talking about more on the personal side, like for the person that has it, or the person that engages with someone that has it, like as a teacher,
Like,
educator, coach, or more as the person themselves?
just like in general, like for the public and stuff. So more the teacher, educator.
I think the big one is realizing that, I call them the sparkles, the wiggles, the not being able to sit still, that this isn't personal with your athlete, with your student. It's not personal. They're not sitting there saying, I can't wait to be disruptive. They're not. So I think as an educator, it's really important to be sensitive to moments that are going to be challenging for someone that has this, and get ahead of it. Even if you prep them for it, like giving them some advance notice. Hey, we've got some stuff that we've just got to get through here. Let's really work to be on point here. This is super important. But I promise you, after this, there's going to be a break. So you're not going to do this all day. I think communicating in advance can really help.
Yeah.
Getting them prepared. Because I think some of it is also acknowledging them as a real person, that they're not doing this intentionally, and that you can respect them. I think sometimes people with our gift, there's a certain amount of disrespect for it because they think we're lazy, we're undisciplined, we're not wanting to do it. And I think as an educator, if you can treat them with respect, try to get ahead of it a little bit and give them a finite amount of time so they know that there's a release time. Like this is going to be about 30 minutes of really boring work. But after that, we're going to do these things, which I think you'll find more interesting. And I think the respect piece is huge. These are just young people in your situation that do want to learn. They do want to succeed. No one wants to do badly. No one wants to make their teacher mad. So if we can respect them and know it's coming and understand it's a real thing, I think if we can work with that a little bit more, I think the educator will become less frustrated. The student will feel cared for and respected. And ultimately, their goal will be met, which is productivity, that we want them to excel and do well. That's what the teacher wants. And that's obviously what the student wants. I think respect is really a big deal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then this one kind of has two different questions, but the first one is, do you tell people you have ADHD? Like, does it come up frequently or does it not really come up?
If you hang out with me for a half hour, you'll know it pretty quickly. It's so funny. I don't have any stigma about this. I really don't. So if it came up or if I saw someone, I shouldn't say never. I rarely would say someone has this because I'm not a doctor and I don't even play one on TV. So for me, I call them the wiggles. Like my daughter has the wiggles. Right. But my oldest son doesn't. And everyone's different. So I call them the wiggles or the sparkles or the energy. I'll talk about it as energy a lot. But when I do interact with people, I have no problem saying, hey, little off point right now. Sometimes my ADD goes up and, I just need to get a little bit more on point and I reboot. I'll tell people that I need to reboot and refocus and that I don't think I'm on point, but I try to hold myself to a high standard. And I have no problem admitting, hey, I'm not being disciplined right now. I need to be more on point for you. And, I do have a little ADD. So this happens to me sometimes. And then I kind of get myself to reboot.
Yeah. I've never really had an issue with telling people for me personally, but I know some people do not like to tell people because of like stereotypes they face, which was kind of the next part, which is what stereotypes have you faced because of ADD?
I'm going to be honest. I think people nowadays deal with it more than I did because it wasn't publicly discussed when I was your age. Like it was such a dirty secret. You weren't supposed to tell people that you were bouncing off the walls. It was pretty obvious. But it wasn't discussed. It really wasn't. And even if it was only something that, people that had problems had. But I think nowadays it's way harder because there is more information and some people choose to have a negative feeling about it. And it's mostly a lack and an ignorance that people have. They don't understand how to relate to it. So I think the stigma that does exist is when they're ignorant and have a lack of education. But I can't speak heavily to the stereotypes I had or the stigma I had when I was younger. I was just trying to survive it. But as I've been older, I've never felt a negative stigma with it because I understand, I think more because, I'm older, that I understand more how to use it to my advantage. And I laugh at myself. You have to have a good sense of humor if you have ADD. You just have to. You're like, whoa, I'm over here now. And you just have to laugh at yourself a little bit. Life's too short. Like, we got to lighten up a little bit.
Okay. And then you're a coach, so you've worked with a lot of athletes, obviously. And some of these athletes you've mentioned have ADHD or similar types of things. So what type of things have you done to help those type of athletes get the best out of their coaching experience?
I think communication, whether it's an athlete or a student, I think communication's number one. Sitting and having a discussion, because it creates two things. Number one, when you directly communicate about it as a coach or a teacher with the student or the athlete, number one, you're treating them with respect. We talked about that. So number one is just asking how they best take in information. What's the best situation? Do they have to have it written down? Is it better if I create a cue card? Is it best if I repeat it to them first, or if I review the information before the practice or the test, or I may even have some notes I want them to follow along with. Sometimes having notes given in advance can help someone stay a little bit more on point. But I think it really does come to the idea that you communicate them with respect, with patience, and then find out what their coping strategies are. Because a lot of kids, even if they haven't identified it, will have coping strategies that they know work. And then you take it from them. So a lot of times in education or coaching, the real learning comes from them, that they're going to teach you how to help them. And that also makes them more empowered. So they're taking charge of their gift and they're saying, hey, let's try these things. Let's try these things. And as soon as we create that connection for you and your athlete or student, well, that connection is a bridge that helps them become more focused. So I think that's number one, communication. And then number two is patience. You don't have to fly off the handle just because they're not paying attention anymore. Try to find ways to get them back on point, and you got to be willing to take a deep breath. You just need to take a breath. They're not doing it on purpose, right? With younger kids, sometimes I'll try to create eye contact. If I'm losing them, I'll try to create some eye contact directly with them, and that alone will tend to pull them back in. So I do think communication is number one. Finding out what skills they use to be a little bit more effective. And then the second part is that really keeping a sense of humor, staying patient, and taking a deep breath. Like, you got to chill out a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm sure it helps if they're also passionate about the sport like you are, because a lot of times if you're engaged, it's because you're very into it. So is there things you've done to try to get people more into it at times? When they're not paying attention?
It's funny. That's actually funny you bring that up. I haven't thought about this in a long time. When I was at Berkeley, we used to have a huge whiteboard that I'd roll out on the pool deck every day. And I had 3 or 4 people in my group that were very ADD and probably ADD with some hyper. And what we would do is before the practice started, I would have the whole group, but especially them, write on the whiteboard what their mission was of that practice. They created something important for themselves. And when once again, empowerment, I think, tends to help people with ADD, that they need to feel like that they have something important to accomplish. Because when people with our gift have something of importance, making sure they put the fire out, that's important. So they would create goals or objectives for that workout. And people with a lot of ADD, I might even say, all right, for the next 30 minutes, let's create a goal. And they would write it on the whiteboard. And then I would keep bringing them back to that goal, whatever they wanted. For swimming, it would be like great turns, or, maybe something about their technique. But you could do the same thing in school. It's a little harder in a group setting, but that was for coaching, one of the ways that I did it to create an elevated level of focus. I think the other thing is goal setting can really help people, because once again, it's their goal, creates more importance, creates more passion. So those are a couple ways that I would try to steer people with our gift into a situation they can become more successful.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I don't know.
It actually worked great. It was fun. They always like writing on the board too. So once again, they're more involved in it. So that was just a way, but I really do believe empowering people creates more importance to them, and things are important to people with ADD. They tend to do a much better job of. And so I always look for ways to create their own value on their particular objective or goal.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Or at least that's the goal. I mean, you have to laugh sometimes because it doesn't work, but.
Yeah. And then what can friends and family members do to provide support for someone with ADHD?
Keep a sense of humor. Realize it's not personal. They're not doing it to you. This isn't something that someone with ADD is doing to you. You're not, it's happening. And especially with younger people, where maturity and discipline do play into it. But I do think it's taking a breath, being willing to walk away. And in terms of the helping them and supporting them, I do think structure, consistency, and structure really do help. So being consistent as a parent, being consistent as a teacher, as a coach, that you're consistent about what your parameters are. I call them barbed wire. Like what are the rules of which we're going to play this game? I think that, I don't know medically if that's the case, but in my experience of teaching a lot of people, if I'm consistent about how I operate, people with ADD tend to be more effective, in my opinion. So as a parent or as a sibling or whatever, being consistent, we're going to bed at similar times. We tend to eat at the same time. We do our homework at similar times. I think that consistency does provide it just provides more structure, and people with ADD do tend to struggle with keeping structure together.
Yeah.
I don't know do you agree with that the structure helps?
I think structure helps. Yeah. Even though we don't really like structure that much, but yeah.
And I don't mean it has to be so tight that they're suffocated, but there's at least a consistency of how things, and especially things are successful. It's amazing to me. And Cate, I'll tell you something that actually just kind of popped into my head. It's amazing to me how successful people tend to repeat habits that are successful. Like, for example, if you have a particular place in your house that you study well in, repeat that. And people that are successful tend to do that. People that are not as successful tend to keep trying to reinvent the wheel over and over. They try to, I'm going to go to this place to study. I'm going to study in this place. And they don't tend to find what works for them and then repeat it. So I do think that consistency in your own actions. I do really well listening to classical music. I do really well when my room is clean first. And you learn your own strategies and then repeat. Young people, I think, tend to struggle with repeating what works. Once you've found something that works, hold on to it. Keep it. You developed it. It's your secret sauce. And I think that can make all the difference in the world. I really do. That you find your method that works and then repeat it. Don't go away from when you know what works.
That makes sense. Yeah. And then as we wrap up the meeting, is there any hyperfixations that you've had in the past that you think would be interesting to share? Like, what type of things have you hyper-focused on?
That's only someone with ADD could ask that question. Literally, Cate, that's funny. No one else would ask me that question.
Okay.
I have a little bit of a cleaning problem. I do. I tend to get very fixated. Oh, geez.
I clean my closet out randomly and clean everything and reorganize everything. But
yeah, I find being obsessed about if everything's not clean and organized or organized, I literally can see pencils out of place in the middle of doing something. And the next thing you know, I'm over here fixing my pencil case. I just, those things that are out of order distract me a lot. I tend to do very well in creative, free flowing projects, But when things need to be in a line, if they're not in a line, it really does. This is kind of embarrassing to admit. I guess there's a stigma. It's kind of embarrassing that it unnerves me when things aren't in their spot, when they aren't in their place. It really does unnerve me. And
it bothers
I
me
laugh
too.
at myself. Is that same thing for you?
Grace doesn't care, but it bothers me.
Yeah. But instead of thinking like the way I would try to rephrase this for myself, instead of resisting that like it's some bad thing, just keep it organized and like learn to live with it. It's not a bad characteristic. And sure, it's a little bit quirky, but as long as you can know what it is, and then you can put it to good use. So your room's really organized. Okay. Just take care of it and then take care of the next thing you have to do. I don't think it is necessarily a weakness, even though it is a little quirky, right? I'll clean out the refrigerator. I mean, who does that, right? It's just, but it's important to me when I see it, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, this is the most important thing. And I've got to go to a meeting or whatever, but I'm still cleaning out the refrigerator because I get a little bit OCD about it.
Yeah.
Do you think OCD, and I'm not trying to throw around these acronyms like they're no big deal, and ADD, they go a little bit hand in hand?
I think there's some connections, probably.
Is there? Okay. I don't know medically if there are or not, but for me, there's
at times I feel like there might be connections, and you can probably have both. So,
Right. That's true. But someone like you've been so successful with it that you have to have a series of coping skills. And I would be surprised if you didn't have, a number of things that you do to be as successful as you are. And you have been smart enough to repeat them. And I have a feeling you use those systems or those habits to become as effective as you are.
I try.
Yeah. It's not easy though. It's not easy. And I think it's, when you're younger, the struggle is real. I think when you're younger, as you get older, you start to understand it a little bit better. But when you're younger, that struggle is real and it does hurt at times. It really does. I can tell people though that are younger, like it does get better. It does get easier. And you'll learn really that it is a gift.
Well, thank you for doing this interview with me.
Oh, I had tons of fun. No, I really did. And I appreciate your questions. I thought really some of them were very insightful because you kind of surprised me a little bit that you would ask a question like that because most people don't. And it tells me you live with it and you, I think, have a good attitude about it, which I find really refreshing. I really do.
Yeah.
I'd do it again if I can be a frequent guest. No, if I can ever do anything seriously, and that struggle is real. It is very real. Keep a smile, keep a light heart with it all. And, for the most part, these are just tremendous people that, just wired a little bit different. And we sometimes even have to laugh at ourselves. Yeah. So I'm super grateful to come on. Thank you, Cate.
Thank you.